So you might have heard the news. Finland is joining NATO along with Sweden. As some kind of leftist anti-authoritarian from Finland, I thought that I'd give my opinions on the matter. I'm of course not a huge fan of NATO. However, since the Russian attack on Ukraine began, it was clear that Finland will join NATO with overwhelming support. And the shift in support for joining NATO was actually even more drastic than what I expected. This graph depicting the change in support and opposition to NATO paints a quite clear picture. As the situation is what it is, I don't see that there's much to be gained by campaigning against Finland joining NATO, and that the energy would be better spent at trying to influence on how Finland will join NATO and at what cost. I will come back to this later. In Sweden, the change in support has been less dramatic, and I think there's currently no clear majority in favor for joining NATO, but the country is joining anyways. So the situation there is quite different. If there's anyone from Sweden watching, I'm interested to hear more details about the discussion over there. Du kan skriva dem I kommentarsfältet, tackar. The other thing that turned out to be as predictable as Finland joining NATO was Turkey's opposition to both Finland and Sweden joining NATO. My take is that the question is not if Finland will eventually join the NATO. It will. That much is clear. But at what cost and what will it mean to the future of NATO? Before we go to this question, we must look closer to why Erdogan is blocking these countries from joining, as there seems to be quite many reasons for Turkey to behave the way it does. The first and the most obvious reason is something we call iltalypsy in Finnish, which basically means blocking a democratic decision until you get something in return. The direct translation means event milking, but there's probably a better translation that I do not know. Anyways, the milk, Turkey once is lifting the bans on weapons exports to Turkey by several NATO countries. These were imposed after Turkey brutally attacked the Kurdish people in northern Syria following Donald Trump's decision to withdraw a majority of US forces from the area. Further bans were imposed by US after Turkey bought a missile defense system from none other than Russia. The second reason is the genocidal campaign that Turkey is waging against the Kurdish people. Erdogan, who actually quite openly supported the terrorist organization ISIS, wants to wipe out the Kurdish identity from the face of earth in the name of anti-terrorism, and is frustrated for not getting enough international support for this campaign. Turkey has actually just published a so-called Ankara Manifest, which lists 10 demands to Finland and Sweden, and the demands are targeted at Kurdish people and are following. 1. Declaring PKK, Partia Karkeren Kurdistan, or the Kurdistan Workers' Party, and its sister organizations as terrorist organizations. Second demand, ceasing all official contacts with these organizations. Third demand, ceasing all financial aid to YPG, Yekineyen Palestina Jail, or the People's Defense Units, and YPG, Yekineyen Palestina Jin, or the Women's Defense Units. Demand number 4, cutting all contacts with these groups. Demand number 5, ceasing the lobbying of the Gülenist movement in Finland and Sweden. Demand number 6, arresting and returning to Turkey all persons that Turkey has declared as members of PKK and views as wanted persons. Demand number 7, ceasing all actions that jeopardizes Turkey's national security. Demand number 8, joining an anti-terrorist cooperation with Turkey. Demand number 9, cutting all bank and money transfers that are used to finance PKK. And lastly, demand number 10, declaring illegal all NGOs that are working against Turkey. The third reason is the role of Turkey in NATO. Erdogan wants to be a big boy in NATO and show Turkish people that he has as much say in NATO as US, UK and France. Now there might be some other reasons like the Gülenist movement and the US providing an asylum for Fethullah Gülen, but to my understanding these three are the major reasons. Feel free to fill in or to disagree in the comments. What is clear is that the stakes here are actually quite high. How this will play out will not just matter greatly to Kurdish comrades who are under a very serious threat to be thrown under a bus, but it will also affect the future of NATO. If countries that have imposed bans on weapons exports to Turkey lift these bans, these weapons will be used in genocidal campaign against Kurdish people and especially against the Syrian Defense Forces, consisting mainly of YPG and YPG, a major force behind crushing the ISIS caliphate. This would also mean an end to the democratic, multi-ethnic and multicultural project society in northern Syria. It is also quite clear that if Turkey manages to crush SDF and the democratic society in northern Syria, it would mean the resurgence of ISIS and other Islamist terrorist organizations in the area, as Turkey does use Islamist militias in its war campaign. And I think there is quite high possibility that at least some countries will lift these weapons export bans. There has been a rumor circulating around that UK has already lifted their ban earlier, but to my knowledge this hasn't been confirmed. It is also possible that US will lift the ban concerning the F-35 fighter jet program and Erdogan will settle with that. Who knows? It seems to me that Erdogan is throwing shit all around in hopes that it will stick at something. What comes to the list of demands to Finland and Sweden, I don't believe that there is a possibility that these will all be met, as some of them are quite luxurious. It is possible though that Finland or Sweden will make some concessions towards Turkey based on this list. This would mean that Finland and Sweden join NATO as subordinate states, opposed to discussion that has been prevalent in Finland, that by joining NATO, Finland doesn't have to make compromises in its principles about not joining or supporting unjust wars. I think that Finnish and Swedish governments do have the option not to give in, as there's no imminent threat from Russia in foreseeable future, and I don't think Turkey can keep blocking these countries indefinitely. In Finland, the government is currently led by Social Democrats, as it is in Sweden, and while I never put my trust in electoral politics, I think that there is a slight possibility that they are bold enough not to give in. Meanwhile, a big portion of the right wing in Finland has pretty much sided with Turkey's Islamist regime and demand that Finland must do as Turkey says. Now, the third point depends on how these first 2 points play out. Erdogan is an Islamofascist dictator, plain and clear. His party, the AKP, used very similar tactics that the right-wing populist parties in other countries has used to rise in power. They talked about elitist Kemalists with blonde hair and Western goodies, not listening to the forgotten people that they claimed to represent. They talked about freedom of speech and freedom of religion to justify their hate speech and conservative Islamism. And when they got to power, everything about freedom of speech and freedom of religion was quickly forgotten overnight. They eradicated opposition, crushed the labor movement, took control of the media, has attacked and jailed every opposition movement, and even used army to level down Kurdish majority villages within the borders of Turkey. If Turkey's demands are met in fear of Russia, it is not gonna stop there, as it never was gonna stop. It just reinforces the idea that Turkey can legitimately impose its undemocratic, conservative worldview on other countries by threatening them with various consequences and keep on waging an unjust genocidal war against Kurdish population. The more other countries give in, the more leverage Erdogan will get for future demands. The bolder he will get. And we know that these kind of demands are nothing new to Erdogan's foreign policy. We've seen the same kind of thing happen in regard of the migrant crisis and how it was solved. In fear of the right-wing populist parties, the Fortress Europe basically externalized this so-called immigration problem to Turkey, with the result of giving Turkey the means of blackmailing Europe with a new immigration crisis by opening its borders. And Turkey has used this abundantly. This is a disgrace and a part of a larger European policy that has cost tens of thousands of innocent lives drowned in the Mediterranean. A fucking disgrace indeed, and politically a shitty move that EU will face again and again, as Turkey holds all the cards and can blackmail EU countries with bolstering the right-wing European populists who'd love nothing more than a new immigration crisis to capitalize on. And Turkey might actually bring this up if Erdogan don't get his demands met only with blocking the new NATO countries from joining. So what is clear that you don't give in to Erdogan. It is never gonna stop there, and there's just gonna be more demands and threats. Turkey is a fascist country and Erdogan is a dictator engaged in genocidal warfare against Kurdish population. There has been a lot of talk about being naive about Russia and Putin. Let's not be naive about Turkey and Erdogan. There is an optimist in me that hopes that Erdogan will fail with his demands this time. Now, this would not make NATO any better than it is, but I do think that NATO could be worse, that giving in to Turkey would surely be a step into maybe worse possible direction, and that there's a lot to lose if this happens. The pessimist in me, however, says that this is the direction we'll be going to some extent, and that we should not wait and we should not put our hopes in the parliamentary politics and the states, but to organize and prepare to help our Kurdish comrades in every way possible. Meanwhile, I think that we should focus on pressuring Finnish and Swedish governments and other NATO countries not to make any agreements with Turkey, not to give in their demands, and to educate people about the nature of Turkish government and the situation in northern Syria. But that's all this time. I hope you like this. If not, you can tell it. And if you did like, please share this video or my other videos you might also find interesting on your social media sites, as this is the only way I can get some reach for my small YouTube channel. I also greatly appreciate any shout-outs from bigger channels, which I have gotten none, I think, but if I ever get any, I'll be sure to be grateful. Thank you and see you next time. Bye.